What's up, guys? Nick Langer here, aka Baby Rhino, and I'm actually joined by a special guest today, Mr. Jeff McCray. Jeff McCray is a college professor. On top of that, he's also a national level bodybuilder. He's been competing for, I don't know, way too many years.
Long time.
Way too long. And he's actually the one that helped me this past season really kind of understand how to actually activate my back. It was probably one of the biggest assets for me when it came to actually building the muscle that I did build on my back this last off season. So today, Mr. McCray here is going to actually walk us through a couple different lifts. I get to be the guinea pig, and you guys can see kind of the form that we do on everything that we have as far as back movements go.
So I wanted to talk a little bit about just basics of training back and ways to really target the complete musculature of the muscles and the complete musculature of the back, and not to get into a whole lot of complicated terminology, but basically the muscles in your back. There are a lot of muscles in your back, but the basic ones that most people talk about are the lats, the traps, the spinal erectors, and then this middle part of your back, which is where a lot of bodybuilders are deficient, which would be rhomboids, parascapulars. And this is an area that I think bodybuilders tend to neglect and don't really target well because of the way that they perform a lot of their back exercises, and they just miss out on a lot of the benefit of some of the basic exercises that we do just by not really being aware of what's going on in here. And this is something that Nick and I have been working on with him for a while now, and it's just stuff that I've learned from people that I've worked with, and I've worked with a lot of my clients about it. And so the basic idea here is that in order to engage these muscles in the middle of your back, there's got to be motion of the shoulder blade or the scapula. And I wanted to demonstrate this with a couple basic exercises, but first, Nick, can you just raise your arms up over your head? Okay, so if we imagine that he's in a lat pull situation and all stretched all the way up to the top, the scapulas, the shoulder blades go up. And then as you pull down, the scapula needs to come down. But if they don't, which is what a lot of guys do, then a lot of the emphasis goes to the traps, and then the arms do a lot of the pulling, and really very little benefit to the lats as well. So go back up. So what the image that I try to get people to think about is that they're going to bring the shoulder blades down and then start to pull with their arms. And in reality, it ends up being a lot smoother than that, but that's the basic idea. And what that does is it allows the traps to not be so involved in the pulling, and it's really more the middle of the back and the lats that get the benefit. So let's hop in the lat pull. So yeah, good. So one of the things that I teach a lot of my guys is to go all the way to full stretch, and then we're not going to do a complete motion. We're just going to hold the shoulder blades down and then hold it there. And think about keeping your chest up this whole time, and then back up, just to a couple more of those partial pulls. Good. Now, one more stretch and pull, and now go ahead and pull with your arms. Right. And so throughout the whole motion, we're thinking about keeping the chest up and the middle of the back engaged. Now, if you don't feel like you're feeling this much in your lats as you do this, there's a little hack that you can use. Just think about pulling more from the pinky side of your hand, and that can often engage the lats more toward the outside. You agree?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, good. Now, Nick, just smooth it out a little bit so it's not so much of a two-part motion. Just kind of demonstrate what that can look like. Good. Okay, now, I want you to demonstrate doing it wrong. Yes. Okay, notice how his traps get bunched up at the base of his neck, and there's not a lot of scapular motion here. This is something I see a lot in gyms. So what ends up happening is that the biceps are doing a disproportionate amount of the work, and the traps are getting a good isometric contraction, and that's about it. So let's go back to doing it the right way. Good. Okay. So there are a number of other things that you see people do with lat pull. Pulling down too far, which you shouldn't be getting forward rotation of your shoulder with a lat pull. Using a lot of momentum to jerk the weight back. There's a time and a place for loosening up one's form, but it's better to form the basics and really making sure that you're getting a good contraction. Now let's go over to the seated cable row. The concept is really the same here. Really, almost all of your back motions, whether it's a row or a lat pull, I like to follow the same basic concept. So the contraction is generated from that scapular retraction, and then you complete the range of motion by pulling with your arms. Now, one thing about the seated cable row that seated cable row illustrates another point about back training, which is that we really want to get the elbow as far back as we can. And it's the relationship of the elbow to the torso. So we're pulling back with a two-handed row like this. It's pretty easy to see. Sometimes with one arm rows, we end up turning at the waist too much, and we're really not getting a lot of benefit from the back. So if you do find that when you're doing a one-arm row that you're turning your torso quite a bit, just try to not do that so much and really focus on getting your elbow back.
To that point, every single back movement that you do should be a thought of where your elbow goes more than it should be of where your hands are pulled to or anything like that. Because I could always pull my hands to my belly button, which I hear is a cue for a lot of people. The problem is I could also roll my shoulders forward and I could completely disengage my back. Right. So really thinking about the fact that when you're driving your hands back, and I think on this movement it's fairly easy, especially for bodybuilders, because one of our main poses we hit is a rear lat spread, and you imagine that you're actually doing a row to set yourself up before you go. So just keep that in mind when you're driving your elbows. I know the other thing, like you were saying, with a one-arm cable row, even the same, one of the biggest mistakes I see made is with a one-arm dumbbell row. You can have a little bit of an English to it to give you a little bit of full contraction, but I don't want to see you flailing
you're not starting your lawnmower.
Right. So, go ahead.
All right, so go ahead and now with the seated cable row, again, it's about the elbows getting back behind the torso. So we're not going to lean back excessively because that just makes the motion easier. So to get the maximum benefit from it, go ahead and sit up straight, right? And we're still at a fully stretched out position. Now we're going to retract the shoulder blades and then complete the motion. Good. Let's do that a few more times. Now, as you retract your shoulder blades from this angle, think about sending them down, because you can still. One of the difficulties with this is it's still possible to retract your shoulder blades and then scrunch the traps, and that's not what we want. We want to send them down. And if you need to think about lifting here from your chest to really emphasize that, then go ahead and do that. And this is one reason why sometimes I will recommend that guys lean back a little bit more, just to be thinking up from their chest and focus on something above you. Go ahead. In order that you're not scrunching the traps. Now Nick just has massive traps, so they look like they're scrunching, whether he is doing them consciously or not. But we're gonna really focus on this. Sometimes with my clients, I will just leave a finger right here in the middle of their back to keep reminding them, this is where we're targeting this, and not up here. Okay, good. Now smooth it out a little bit so it's not so much of a two-part motion. And this is another exercise where you see people doing it with a little bit looser form just to finish the set, and that's fine to a point. All right, now, go ahead and hop up, Nick. So, one of the things that we worked on with Nick when he was getting ready for his last competition was really trying to keep the back engaged in the rear double bicep. So go ahead and get into that pose, Nick. Because Nick even had a tendency to scrunch here in this pose. Yes, like that. And that's not what you want. You really don't open up the back enough when you do that. So let's just go back up to the top. So one of the things that he and I worked on was this very same concept of, yes, sending the scapula down as he gets into the pose, go actually beyond, right, and then come back up and open up the lats, always thinking about keeping the chest up and the middle of the back engaged. You want to add anything, Nick?
No, that's to a T exactly how it should be. I mean, again, it's probably the two main keys for any back movement is going to be scapular retraction, like we talked about, and then elbow movement. If you can keep those two things in mind, you're going to activate the muscle fully. And you're talking about someone who's really been focusing on this probably for the past year and a half now, and really didn't have much for back development until this past year. And I will say those two things and actually mentally cueing those two actions actually have helped out a ton as far as being able to get that mind-muscle connection and full activation in my back. And it's only getting better, but I will say it takes time, it takes practice. So don't get discouraged if you don't get it right off the bat, because it's not easy if you, especially for me, are very, very trap dominant. Your body's gonna have a tendency to wanna go towards your traps. It's gonna actually take you fighting the motion to actually go into the muscles that are weak.
And so some suggestions for really mastering that would be train a little lighter, so that you're not going to the muscles that you're dominant with, right? But also training slower, incorporating held contractions, 1 or 2 second hold at the bottom of a motion to really focus in on the contraction before you let it all relax again.
And again, I think another key that I make to a lot of my clients, and I know Jeff does the same thing, is your concentric motion can be a quick motion. It's the eccentric and it's that pause at the bottom that's really going to help out with actually being able to fully contract the muscle and getting full elongation and actually breaking down the muscle in that aspect too. So you got to think about movements in general should be explosive, but then also controlled. And when you're trying to build muscle tissue, those two aspects are really going to help to break down the muscle tissue the way you're looking to, rather than these quick motions that I'm seeing a lot of people do. And I'm not saying you can't move heavy weight. I'm saying do that kind of a form with heavy weight. So you'll see, videos with myself training, and soon we'll have some videos with Jeff training as well. But you'll see we do move the weight pretty quick. We move pretty heavy weight, but at the same time, that eccentric motion, it's a conscious motion where you're actually contracting the muscle to let the weight down, rather than just letting it go.
But if you feel like you're not getting a good contraction from your back exercises in this middle portion of your back that we're talking about, try some of these partial repetitions where you're just moving the shoulder blades and not completing the rep, and just get focused on that, and then start making it a 2-part motion, and then gradually start incorporating it into full range of motion without that little hitch there.
Yep. And I will say another one that I like to do is actually on an incline bench, laying on an incline bench, and having dumbbells in your hands and doing scapular retraction to actually just feel the motion of your scapulas coming together. You don't have to go super heavy. Trust me, you will wear those muscles up very quickly. But that'll get you that mindset of, okay, back. Okay, now I understand that motion. Now I need to incorporate that into every motion I do before I do a back movement. So,
good.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.